And we are live. Hello and welcome to today's webinar on our 2026 market predictions, what's in the cards for customer communications. My name is Sophie Cheng and I'm the SVP of Product Marketing at Sinch. For those of you who don't know Sinch, we are a leading cloud communications provider helping businesses across the globe connect successfully and securely with their customers via messaging, voice, and email. And I am joined by two powerhouses today, Stefano from MEF, the Mobile Ecosystem Forum, and Vandita from HubSpot. Stefano, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself briefly and share a little bit more about your background as well, and then we'll hand it over to Vandita.
Yes, good afternoon or good morning, everybody, depending on where you're based. My name is Stefano Nicoletti. I represent the Mobile Ecosystem Forum. The Mobile Ecosystem Forum is a trade association that represents the interest of a number of ecosystem players in the value chain of mobile. And we're particularly strong in the field of messaging and anti-fraud. And as a background, I have been working in telecoms for the last 25 years, particularly in the policy and regulatory area. Over to you, Vandita.
Awesome. Thanks, Stefano, and thanks, Sophie. So excited to be here. So my name is Vandita. I am a group product manager at HubSpot. And HubSpot, as many of you may know, is really a platform across marketing, sales, service, and customer success. And so my role really is leading the omni-channel products strategy across voice, messaging, and all of our channel partners and ecosystems. So a lot of my focus is really helping our customers, partners, and businesses, look across their omni-channel journeys and make sure it's really rooted in a data-driven customer journey. And my background, I have a decade-long experience in B2B CRM and come from a telecom background, so it's all a full circle for me here.
This is great. Well, I'm really excited to have you both on the panel today, and thank you for joining us. Now, as we get going, for the audience, a couple of housekeeping items. We definitely want to get to know you, who's on the call, so please share with us in the chat where you're dialing in from today so that we get a sense of who is here with us today. You can also use the Q&A function throughout our session to ask questions, and we will leave time at the end to cover some of those. And if you really like a question somebody else has already asked, use the upvote function so we can prioritize those first. Now, before we get into a discussion, this is not going to be us sharing a bunch of slides. You're going to hear real world examples and insights from our experts, but we do want to take a brief moment and set the scene with a couple of things that we're expecting to see in 2026 when it comes to customer communication trends. Based on Sinch's analysis of the market, we see the future shaping up around three core pillars. First, we think we need to brace for an explosion of engagement. We expect that AI agents are about to spark a massive surge in conversation volume as businesses use AI to engage customers in ways that we've never seen before, including engaging over new channels like conversational channels, as well as seeing different communication mechanisms. So seeing agents communicate with other agents or agents communicate with humans. Second, this convergence of conversational channels as well as AI will lead to a redefinition of the customer journey. Customers will expect seamless, connected journeys where context follows them across every single channel. As part of this, we believe voice AI will become the preferred channel for complex issues, simply because we all know a responsive, intelligent voice just feels more human. And at the same time, rich two-way conversational messaging, think channels like RCS or WhatsApp, will become the new standard. And brands that can't connect these conversational dots into a single unified journey will unfortunately lose relevance. So it's about creating a consistent experience that builds loyalty and includes tailoring communication strategies for different regions that truly separate your brand as a global leader. And then finally, this new landscape is going to be governed by new rules of trust and relevance. With the rise of deepfakes and AI-generated fraud, verified and secure communication is no longer a nice to have. It really is the absolute foundation of brand trust. If customers can't trust it's you, they simply won't engage. And alongside trust comes relevance. Tomorrow's intelligent inboxes will reinvent email as a precision channel, automatically filtering out anything that isn't perfectly personalized. In this new world, if a message isn't trusted and deeply relevant, it simply will become invisible. So, with all of that in mind, I like to ease my way into a good discussion. So I'd like to kick things off with a topical icebreaker. Vandita, I'm going to start with you. When you look at customer communications today, what feels fundamentally broken, and which of these shifts gives you the most confidence that we're finally fixing things?
Yeah, great question. I think from a customer communication standpoint, what what feels fundamentally still broken in 2026 is, I think, as everyone has a lot of choice of channels. There's all these sophisticated tools out there. Channels are getting richer and more in depth of meeting customers' needs. So all of that sophistication still exists on surface, but I think underneath, what still feels fundamentally broken is the isolation of data. Like, you still have businesses with different departments and teams, either maybe on different systems with different data silos, or teams associated to different channels. So I think that fragmentation still exists today. And this is not something new that I'm saying. I'm sure we've all talked about fragmented data in the past couple of years in these sessions, right? But I think some of the shifts that you were talking about, Sophie, especially like AI agents now increasing like conversation volume. I think when you see shifts like that, because that is the reality today, that's the market that we're all competing in, that to me gives me strong focus that we are going to fix this fragmentation problem, because you now have agents increasing conversation volume, and if you're relying on sort of a fragmented data, you'll have AI giving very confident but inaccurate responses, right? So it doesn't have a full picture. So I think all of this, to me, like that particular trend in particular, gives me confidence that we are like moving the shift, and ultimately we're all going to win if everything is rooted in like that unified customer data, like no matter the team and no matter the channel.
I love that. And I couldn't agree more, right? You do need to build the right foundations. Otherwise, everything on top will break. We're definitely going to come back to this topic, but I'm going to hand it over to you, Stefano, and ask you a different question. Many brands are already experimenting with AI, rich messaging, and omnichannel journeys. But what we're at least seeing at Sinch is that adoption and comfort levels are very uneven across these different technologies. So what separates best-in-class providers from those who are just starting out?
Well, I think best-in-class provider designed with trust and legitimacy in mind before they expand to new channels. So I think it's important that you treat identity as a shared infrastructure within your organization and across all the channels you operate. Think about who is allowed to speak to customers, how that identity is verified, and how does it travel across the channels. Once you've got these questions answered, I think you are ready to prepare the customer for the best journey. Because ultimately, from a customer perspective, the good customer communication, and it's sort of an invisible design, so to speak. The customer does not realize it does at the beginning, but then the conversation should flow without friction. So they are more comfortable, they feel confident, they are speaking to the right people, and you gain their trust, and then conversation is a lot more effective. I'd like to bring a very, very simple example I experienced personally the other day. I had this phone call that he said, "Are you Stefano Nicoletti?" I said, "Yes, I am." And I said, "Here we go again, another one of those nuisance calls." And then they say, "What's your date of birth?" "Well, I'm not going to tell you." I said, "I was just about to hook up." And then I realized that it was my GP wanting to confirm some medications. And stupid example, but they had all the data to identify themselves and to gain my trust. They knew exactly what medication I took, and so they could confirm who they were straight away. But it was almost treated from me as if it was a nuisance call or a fraud. So once you get people's trust, then conversations move a lot more easily.
I couldn't agree more, and I actually really love that example, and think we should double down on this trust theme, right? Because that ultimately will be the foundation of making customer comms successful. It always has been, but will be even more so in this new era of agentic communication. So maybe before we chat new channels and AI that everybody's keen to hear about, let's kind of really talk about building that strong foundation of customer trust. We at Sinch actually recently ran some research that ties exactly into what you're saying, Stefano. 53% of consumers have received a legitimate brand message, but they thought it initially was a suspicious message. So just like you, they were kind of like, hang on, this feels like spam, but actually it ends up being a real message, and leads to people potentially ignoring really important updates as well, like you just mentioned, a doctor's message. And on the flip side, you also have companies struggling with this. So businesses say that security and privacy is actually their biggest communication challenge today. So I'm curious, Stefano, with consumer skepticism at an all-time high, what do you feel like businesses could do to prove their trustworthiness?
It's interesting that you read those statistics, because we at MEF, we also run our consumer survey testing for what really people care for. And our results are very much in line with what you have. So when asking about what are the key engagement drivers, we found out that improved security is number one. So that's what enable people to engage more freely. On the contrary, when we say what stops you engaging, what are the blockers, again, the sensation that there is a pure security. Yeah. So again, security comes as number one. And it's interesting, in this complex industry, security, it's perceived differently by the various actors. Should say operators, telecom operators have learned this the hard way, and over many years they learned that to anchor security with at network level, and that was not necessarily a consumer or let's say customer experience need. It was more to preserve the system, to reduce fraud. When it comes to further down the line, the CPaaS or the messaging platforms themselves, they then enable the interaction, but still depends on that identity. And ultimately, they are facilitating the enterprise that ultimately is responsible for that workflow and from a perspective of communication, and authorization. So I think it's important that the element of security is kept at the center. There's another element in terms of the standards, particularly if we talk about conversational AI, which you kind of referred to at the beginning, one of your key trends, like the explosions of AI. It's a very complex ecosystem, and there isn't a single, I'd say, rule book. There is a set of shared needs to address: identity, interoperability, but also the governance framework. How does AI operate within your business? So how does the AI systems interact with the messaging capability? And so how do you make the same conversation portable across the various channels? How that conversation is operated by AI can be audited. Yeah? So what is the real clear attribution? Where are the logs? How do you define the rules of engagement? How do you define human in the loops? So I think trying and refers to the best standards that you can at global level. That's a key aspect.
Stefano, I love what you said about the security being front and center. I think that's something that we have really started to, shift at HubSpot, and something I think that businesses in general, like security is no longer like this back end need. It is truly a front office differentiator. But I think the key with like a lot of customers today is that you need to know how to strike the balance, right? Like you don't want to receive that phone call from your GP where they're not positioning themselves as, I know who you are, I know what your needs are, I know exactly where you are in your journey, and that like establishes that instant trust. Or versus like, leaning the other end where you feel like it's not secure. So you still want to be looking out for signals like, this is a known customer, I know their needs, but I'm going to like offer a secure platform so that I can trigger them alerts when things seem sensitive, or if it's a new channel, like it's a brand new setup, and those like one-time authorizations are needed. So I think overall, like striking that balance is key. And with rise of AI, it's also become concerning because now you have AI triggering messages and alerts. So that all needs to be rooted in that customer context. I think ultimately our customers will trust us. They'll trust brands that respect their time and know who they are. So I think those are the like key things to look out for.
I love that. And we're now kind of chatting about trust, both from governance and rules and regulations that need to be put in place, more from an industry-wide standpoint. But then we're also chatting about what can individual industry players do, like ourselves, as well as customers who are communicating or businesses communicating with their end customers. So there's multiple different angles to this trust play. And I love what you just said, Vandita, that it can become a front office differentiator. You touched briefly on context. I'm curious, how can businesses use customer context that they already have in their own systems of record, for example, their CRM? Mm-hmm. How can they use that to build trust and deliver security that actually feels helpful and not high friction? And I'd love to hear it from two perspectives. One, what are you personally doing at HubSpot to deliver that best-in-class experience? But then what are you seeing from some of your best customers?
Yeah, great question. So I'll address the first part in terms of kind of what we're doing at HubSpot, especially with context. I think one of the key things that I touched upon earlier was sort of that centralized system. And I think that is the foundation. So probably my biggest takeaway for anyone listening is first look at your systems, and which is this what we've done at HubSpot to look at how your teams are organized. I think some of the foundational areas where you'll see things breaking is, your marketing team is assigned to email, and then your support team is assigned to, those messaging channels. So yeah, you'll receive an email from something, and as soon as you respond, it's going to a whole different team. And that's okay. I think even if you had to organize a business, that is okay, provided that the other team on that other channel is looking at the exact same profile. So no matter if Sophie reaches out on email to this other team or another department, we know who you are and we know what your needs are. We know where you are in the journey. And I think those, give an example, I'll say, is that if a customer, and this is kind of going into your second question too and bouncing between both, is, if your customer is dealing with a big pressing issue and they reach out and you are going through back and forth, helping them troubleshoot. At the same time, if your marketing department is sending them promotional emails, I think that's when trust sort of starts to shake, because it feels either tone deaf or just not sensitive enough to where the customer is at in that journey. So I think those, first fundamentally is really making sure that, those siloed data, channels and teams, they're all sort of rooted in that unified context. And then the other, going back to sort of the brands, I think that has a big ripple effect of customer loyalty. Customers, like I mentioned earlier, respect brands that respect their time. And I think that consistency, when you show up again and again, it compounds over time, and it has a big ripple effect on, customer trust and loyalty as a whole.
Yeah, I love that point. And, thinking about this connected journey, to me, it feels like it just becomes even more complicated when you're not only talking about between teams, but now you're also bringing agents into the picture. Yeah. And now maybe not everybody has rolled those out, but you've got humans responding to things or setting up campaigns or responding to support tickets, but now you're also going to have AI in the loop, which means you definitely need those guardrails in place. I do have a follow-up question, but Stefano, I'm curious if you have any thoughts that you wanted to add to what Vandita just shared.
I think I sympathize. I mean, I really recognize what Vandita says, particularly the importance of context in conversation. As a customer, when you feel like you don't have to repeat the same time again and again because you passed on to the next team, and it's just frustrating. It's so liberating to have someone that knows what you're talking about. You don't have to explain things from scratch. And if only AI could help you manage this complexity and this journey across the different channels, that would be fantastic. So I think it's a real value add, and you feel like you are treated as someone important, someone values your time, and so it's a really important value for the customer. I think it makes a big difference. I mean, for me, it does. So apologies, it's more of like a personal experience as opposed to one that comes from the industry, but that's what I feel like to share.
That's totally fine. And I agree with you, right? I think we spent so much time optimizing individual interactions versus optimizing the entire customer journey. And so now we're spending a lot more time thinking about connected conversations. And Vandita, we've talked a little bit about this. You see this every single day. Where do these connected conversations typically break down? You gave us a hint at the beginning, but would be curious if you've got anything else to share.
Yeah, I think there's lots of moments where these connected conversations break down. I think we see that in sort of the way the system is set up, across, I think looking across your marketing, support, your sales, and customer success. And I think you see some of these silos of working through troubleshooting issues with our customer support team, and making sure that your marketing department has a view into that. But I think AI, like you mentioned with AI agents now in the mixture too, there is you see those connected journeys also in the mix of agents and humans sort of collaborating together deeply. And so you want to make sure that now it's not just about context carryover from one team to the other, but you're making sure that, as you have and I know we'll get into AI later too, but as you have sort of these agents in a specific department fielding and answering questions, that we can use the power of the platform and pass that context over to a marketing team. So for example, having those connections between support and sales, support and your customer success teams, making sure that you can identify those connected journeys and how that may translate into those life cycle moments, like an upsell opportunity or a retention. And I think that's when you see the aha moment of why do we care about connected journeys in the first place? And why does that even matter? And how improving that like underlying platform can give those like benefits as part of the journey altogether.
I love that. And I think part of that also is regional nuances, right? We asked our audience where they're all dialing in from. We've got folks from Sweden, the UK, Croatia, the US, South Africa, probably missed a couple countries. So we've got folks from across the globe that have dialed in. And so a huge part of really building a strong connected journey, but also orchestrating things effectively, is about choosing the right channel, also in the right region. And so how can global businesses adapt their channel strategies for different markets? We see major differences when it comes to communicating in LATAM, for example, versus North America. So Stefano, curious if you've got any insights or thoughts on that.
Yes, I mean, we are a global organization and we very much observe that. You said that right. Again, we run this consumer survey, which is available to our members. And again, we have analyzed what is their preferred channel of communication, what the consumer choices are. And you can see clearly there are regional patterns, as you say. WhatsApp dominates in Brazil. Line, the WhatsApp version of Japan, is very strong there. In the US, it's more of a mix of Messenger and iMessage and WhatsApp, and also other environment. SMS is very important for reach, particularly in the UK, whereas more elaborated conversation usually happen over other channels. And again, India requires a bit of a broader mix. But I guess to kind of reiterate the point that you were making, global strategy must be identity-led. So choose your channel locally and regionally, but make sure your identity and trust strategy is global. Yeah? So it's standard. That is not just the way you identify customers, the way you communicate your logo, your brand, etc., across the various channels.
I love that. So global standards, but adjust it for regional preferences. That feels like a perfect segue to me to actually go a little bit deeper on individual channels. We often talk about omni-channel, and actually I'm advocating for the fact that we change that to optimal channel, because to me it's less about sending more like the same message across every single channel. It's more about sending the right message on the right channel to the right customer at that point in time. And like you just said, that will differ depending on where folks are based across the globe, but also based on context, right? How have they typically leveraged certain channels, or do they normally respond to a WhatsApp faster than an SMS? Do we typically get higher engagement on email versus text message, for example? And so all these things have to be taken into account to truly develop a modern customer journey. Now, let's take a little bit of time and zoom in on some of the channels to maybe make it a bit more tangible for some of our listeners. We touched a bit on voice, but maybe I'll start with you, Vandita. Where do you feel like voice AI is going to fit into some of these more complex journeys that we're seeing?
Yeah, I think I remember on a prep call you had said that voice is having its renaissance moment, and I just wanted to bring that in because I think it's so true that it's no longer that, oh, who wants to get on a phone call? I know a lot of people hate getting on phone calls, but there is no better channel to get instant clarity and that real-time judgment and trust than voice. But I think the way we approach voice is seeing so many shifts in 2026. Fundamentally, with the rise of agents, we're definitely seeing the rise of voice agents, especially when it comes to fielding those like your fundamental baseline, tier one, common, frequently asked questions, and using that, as an opportunity to obviously get more efficient on a phone call. Companies want to save, costs. And yes, there is a big cost saving aspect too for that. But I think from a voice standpoint, with speech to speech, there is so much power in like really, voice agents understanding the customer, getting that full context, and then using those signals to actually, bring even humans in the loop if need be, right? So when a call gets escalated, when it's the issue becomes very complex, there is frustration, and you just want to get on the phone call. There is like a great synergy you see between agents and humans sort of working together. I think the other big piece that we think a lot about HubSpot is sort of the journey, because you can sort of break down the phone call into these moments of, oh, I'm just about to pick up the phone. What do I need to know, right? And be armed very quickly with context of making sure at hello, who's calling, what the context is, what they might be calling about. So it's sort of like this play between voice agents, but also assistants on voice, right? And then it sort of transcends into like during a conversation, you can get like real time like coaching and recommendations of how you might actually help a customer on the other side, right? And then route them intelligently to the right person. And then of course, with voice, any data that's on a conversation for any company is like gold. You want to preserve that so that you can learn about the customer. And I think that post-call moment, the post like voice interaction moment is key, because as soon as you hang up, you can then take that conversational data and trigger follow-up actions, and you could send an email based on the context of the conversation. And then what gets even more amazing is you can then pass that context over to all departments. So everyone has like this very real-time, up-to-date understanding and context of the customer. So I think voice is going to continue having its moment in the market, and we're going to see lots of like innovation in that space. So I'm very excited about that.
I can tell you're very excited. I love that passion coming through, and also how you shared examples of how the different channels can then connect throughout the journey, but also breaking down some of those team silos that we just talked about, right? Understanding the context that that customer has across the different touch points. So right before they're getting on the call versus afterwards in their follow-ups and so forth. We're seeing the same thing at Sinch, I would say, where customers want to use voice for certain high stakes use cases. Specifically, customer support is definitely one of those where people need more context. So there's a bit more nuance to the conversation, right? It's not as simple as I need to return a pair of shoes I just bought. I actually have an issue. And certainly also in certain, maybe more, let's say, high risk industries, you might be talking financial services or healthcare. It's really, really personal subjects for people. That's another area where we're definitely seeing voice coming back, because you want to have that connection, even if it is first with a bot, but then being able to triage that to a human and have that real connection really is important. Stefano, I'm curious, are you seeing similar things in the data that you're collecting?
I mean, we, particularly myself, I'm coming from the angle of SMS, because we at MEF, we run a sender ID registry. So we have a platform that helps banks and logistic companies and governments to reduce smishing on that platform. So I'm very close to that world on a daily basis. SMS is still great for reachability. I mean, it's simple. Let's not forget that simplicity is number one characteristic of your channel, and you really need to keep that in mind. It's got an amazing reach. You don't have to install anything on your phone, and it gets to you, and it works also because you can have tiny URLs or long URLs, and your communication starting from there. I mean, it's still very, very much used in the UK and also in the rest of Europe. So on the other hand, while we are seeing RCS starting to take up, perhaps not at the same speed as we would have thought 5-6 years ago. So there's the element, there are some complexities that in the various frameworks that need to be addressed. But, you know, when listening to Vandita, I was also wearing my regulatory hat in and thinking, well, hold on a second, you're making this conversation go around every single department in your business. And what about privacy? What about, you know, the information you're using from customers? And that is really very important. You know, even in the UK, in Europe, we've got strict rules around the GDPR, the general data protection rules, and so on. And they are proving extremely complex to handle when you want to be effective at marketing and when you want to be simple in your communication, yet taking kind of, let's say, the regulatory requests. So it's an important element to bear in mind, because it's not an easy journey. Compliance is not an easy journey there.
It's definitely not. And you know, you've touched now a little bit on that shift, Stefano, from one-way messaging to conversational. You talked a little bit about RCS previously in the conversation. You've touched on WhatsApp. What do you think we can anticipate for 2026 when it comes to conversational messaging?
Well, look, we see a mix of trends, and I think definitely the complexity that around the explosion of AI is a trend that we observe as well. I think there will be a bit of different trajectories of growth in different parts of the world. I'm also expecting an investment on behalf of the organization in what I said at the beginning, trust. Again, wearing my regulatory angle here, I am observing that the regulatory demand in the world of know your customers and know your traffic rules is growing. It's growing very much. So, and this is something we've always predicated at MEF, but it's coming from all the various regulators. So I can expect that it's going to be reflected also in that dimension on how onboarding is being made and how trust is gained by the organization, by the enterprise, and how consumer engage with them. So I guess a lot of focus on this, on the sender accountability at scale. That's a trend that, from my perspective, I can observe and I expect will happen.
That's a great point. So I guess with that, what do businesses need to do to be able to handle these two-way conversations? And that could be a question for both you, Stefano, and Vandita, because there's different angles to this.
Yeah, I think Sophie. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry, I think.
I was just going to jump in to say, Sophie, your point about omni-channel, right? And I think that there is this sense that, you know, with omni-channel, you have to use all the channels. And I think that is definitely getting challenged because it's really about, you know, making sure that you're selecting the channel based on the customer's intent and preference. I mean, email's not going away, but email's great for like those informational order updates. But you know, with the rise of, you know, agents on live chat and WhatsApp and RCS, you know, there is that like two-way interaction need. So we see that shifts a lot, even at HubSpot with our customers, where you know, your customers will reach out on, you know, email, and then all of a sudden it becomes like this back and forth engagement. And at that point, you know, that is not the, you know, the right channel for that back and forth real time sort of a nature. And so you need to kind of like do the transition to orchestrate the journey from like email to like a two-way, WhatsApp or RCS. But as a customer, like I should feel like it is such a seamless experience, right? And that is like up to brands to make sure that it's sort of designed this way with email and SMS. SMS is also great for like some of those quick, urgent authentication or, a quick one-way interaction, but it lacks some of those like dynamic capabilities that RCS and WhatsApp have for those real-time conversations. So I think that we really look at like some of like that channel selection from that customer intent and that preference in mind. And I think that's when brands will win, that like orchestrate the two-way messaging in the part of the journey based on the signal of like the customer's action and what they might need. Stefano, go ahead. You were saying something.
Yeah, I was just saying, perhaps repeating myself, but design for legitimacy and trust. Invest in your brand, make sure it's consistent across all channels. Ensure it's perceived in less than a second by your customers. So that's how you build trust. Make sure that happens. Once you've got that, build complexity in the channels, but identity and as a shared infrastructure first, then scale up channels, then make your communication more complex. That would be my recommendation.
So if I were to repeat that back, Stefano, you're saying for our listeners, they should first make sure they have truly optimized one channel before they try and add additional channels to the mix, regardless of what use case they're trying to solve. If that's a customer update use case or a marketing campaign, it's best to optimize for one first. Otherwise, if you're not building on a strong foundation, you're kind of breaking the rules of trust from the get-go. Did I get that right?
Yeah, I mean, I would have thought many of them already communicate on more than one channel. So I guess I'm not saying retrench, but I'm saying focus on the legitimacy and the trust of your brand or your identity across those channels. Make sure it's strong. Then move on to more complex channels. I mean, this conversation is also in the context of, AI and conversational AI. One may be drawn into develop in new and more complex channels before thinking, what's my identity? How do I communicate effectively to my customers? So I think that needs to be done first, then expand your channels. Is that?
That's clear. I appreciate that. Thank you, Stefano.
I'll also add that another step for the audience and the check before you expand your channels is make sure you have that context, because if you expand your channels but you don't have the context, then now you have just created yet another siloed point. So you want to be kind of careful even in that expansion journey to go through the context first.
That's a really important point, Vandita. I definitely agree. So we keep coming back to trust and building solid foundations before you expand either in channels or in more complex use cases, because ultimately, customer trust is built over many small interactions, but it can get broken very quickly. Like we've done research where we found that one bad brand experience is enough to completely break trust. So you have to take this really seriously. Now, we've been chatting a little bit about the evolution of voice and conversational messaging, but we can't neglect email. You did briefly mention it, Vandita. I mean, email is still king, right? It gets used for so many different interactions. We do expect that channel to move from more of a broadcast tool, right? You said it's a great tool for informational updates, to be a little bit more of a precision channel. I think we all are dying for the day to see our inboxes be a little bit more intelligent, so that we don't have to sift through endless updates. What are you expecting to see on that front, Vandita? And how could we consider different metrics maybe and how we might be measuring the success of email going forward?
Yeah, I think that the trend doc that was sent as part of this panel was fantastic, and I think it touches upon very well about the rise of intelligent inboxes. And I think that the exciting part is that the rise of intelligent inboxes is sort of, therefore it's forcing marketers to really reflect on their strategy. I think email strategy as a whole, because it's no longer just enough to show up by giving your brand presence by scheduling campaigns, right? You really gotta, to your point, it's become a precision channel. So now you really got to know where's the customer at, and what does success really mean on this channel? Like, what are my goals, and what are we really trying to achieve for this customer, right? And kind of goes back to so the bar being raised with intelligent inboxes, and sending emails which are based on the action, like either it's context based on what has occurred or what needs to happen next. And the same thing with like metrics. I know open and clicks are still going to be tracked, but they've sort of, I think, evolved into more like input metrics, because your larger, how you measure success and the impact really has shifted to a more multi-metric engagement model, where you're checking, did this drive value, right? Okay, so this email was sent. Did it actually result in a conversation? Did it result in more adoption? Did it result in a save moment or a retention? Did this lead to any sort of upsell opportunity? And I think those sort of connectiveness between even your marketing and sales and your customer success, I think that is sort of tying email together, and it's like shifting even how you look at metrics as a whole. And I think brands are now really shifting their email strategy to be really rooted in that feedback loop. It's not just, I have a plan, here's my campaign list, but it's really rooted in, okay, what are we hearing from sales? What are we hearing from customer success? What should be targeted next, so that the customer feels very, very heard from the brands?
So it's really all about impact over activity. We've got a couple questions from the audience. So before I get to those, I would love to ask both of you, and I'll start with you, Stefano, and then go back to you, Vandita. If you could give our audience one strategic priority to focus on for 2026, what would it be?
I would say focus on the underlying platform, and ensuring that you are building your business across marketing, success, and sales teams on that shared context of the customers. I do believe that companies that are going to win in this next wave are not the ones that have the maximum AI tools. They really are the ones that are building AI very woven into the workflows of these departments, and all rooted in the shared context.
Love that.
Yeah, I'd say, again, invest in trust, global trust, and then choose local channels to communicate.
That's great. Short and sweet. All right, let's go to some of the audience questions that we have. I'm going to take a quick browse through, and then I'll hand them to each of you. So number one, engagement is the number one issue in Canada. People are not answering calls. Most show up as likely spam, and there is a fear of smishing for SMS. Why do we think AI will move the needle on this? Stefano, what's your take?
Well, look, as communication is on the rise, smishing and fraud and all fraud of activity and phishing is also on the rise. So unfortunately, as much as we were hoping to simplify this problem, it's ramping up everywhere. And when you look at the statistics of the amount of money lost by banks in fraud. It's growing every single year. It is a big problem. Does AI provide a solution? I think it's a difficult one, because I think it does, but at the same time, it helps fraudsters in making ever more sophisticated frauds. So it's a bit of a circular solution here. It depends on who's running faster. It's always going to be a catch up, and it's going to be a complex one. So I hope so, but unfortunately, at the time we're speaking, I cannot see this happening immediately. So it's going to be a problem there. We're going to have to work hard and invest on a lot to secure channels. Hence my point about security. I mean, we've seen in the stats that I mentioned, security is the number one important perception from consumer. They want to make sure that, you know, they are communicating with someone they trust.
And I think it also ties back to the point that you were making earlier on around having to have really good guardrails in place to help, you know, fight spam, smishing, fraudsters, and so forth. So thanks for that. Vandita, anything you want to add? Otherwise, I'll go to the next question.
I think the only thing, I'll add is that I don't think AI is meant to, like, my personal take is like it's not meant to actually solve for the spam and phishing. I think those tools are getting very sophisticated, and some of the points that Stefano was making are spot on in terms of, you know, just having those verified identities and thinking about how do you show up as a verified caller as opposed to showing up as spam. And I know that it has a lot of like regional and local like regulations that you have to like go through to even show up as a verified identity. But then I think AI sort of plays a part in the whole security picture to kind of just make the whole system more efficient. It can help, understand trends. It can help like sort of massage over forming that identity better because of, it can pick up on interactions that have been had before, and it knows if it's like a known identity or an unknown. So I think it plays a part, but it doesn't, bypass the need of fixing those like regulatory aspects that Stefano was mentioning.
That's a great point. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next audience question. This is for the healthcare industry specifically. Do you have any data or analysis on the user sentiment and reaction to AI voice? I'm coming from the healthcare sector in the UK, so I'm keen to learn if patients will naturally trust AI voice given the nature of the conversations. We've got some data actually on that from Sinch, so I could share my perspective, and then I'd love to hear you two add yours. What we see when it comes to AI adoption, voice AI or any other form, is it is definitely generational and situational. So there are certain generations that are a little bit more attuned to adapting new technology. Typically, younger generations we see in the research that we run are more keen to adopt new technology if it saves time. However, specifically for healthcare, we actually have a whole research report. We can drop the link in the chat here as well for healthcare. A lot of folks are keen to get to an answer fast. So if they want to reschedule an appointment, if they've got problems with billing, for example, they'd still like to get hands-on support. So voice AI is a great choice, but these are low risk situations where patients typically are very open to communicating with AI voice. So I would say it definitely depends on the type of context, but yes, it is a channel that we expect to see being leveraged quite a bit in the healthcare sector as well. Curious if Stefano or Vandita, either of you have any thoughts?
I'm just curious that with my example on the general practitioner clinics, I was on the right industry. My experience is that it's extremely fragmented in the UK, and so there is indeed an issue with trust, and it's complex. It's not a nice experience. Whether AI voice can better that, consideration that, by its own nature, the healthcare has to deal with patients that tend to be older than the average. Perhaps it's not going to be an easy one. But again, I don't want to sound pessimistic. I think there is great amount of benefits that AI can bring into healthcare, perhaps not necessarily AI voice.
Yeah, I'd sort of see it like based on, I think maybe Sophie, what you were doubling on is that it's based on some nuances. Like I do think that, with healthcare, there's a lot of sensitive information. There's personal data that you're not comfortable sharing. But I think that there are these system generated, aspects where, a lot of like clinics, hospitals, like their booking system, you could go to ZocDoc and book things like in the US, or you have to go to their proprietary system, and it's complex, maybe it's old. So I think that voice AI, what I see is like there is, talking to customers, seeing what the appetite is. There's a lot there in the proactive side where it's just, it's not a conversation, but it's a call, and it's reminding you of your appointment, or it's reminding you of things you need. It's scheduling, it's helping you schedule another appointment. So I think that those are like really solid like use cases of voice AI, and that can apply in sort of the healthcare sector. And then I think the other side of when we'll see a world in healthcare where people are actually engaging with personal data, I think that's yet to be seen. But I do know that all of us have become a lot more comfortable now sharing all of our information with ChatGPT. So that's the world we're in, that we're now just a lot more comfortable as a society talking to agents. So I think it's still to be seen what people might share from a healthcare data standpoint. But at least that trust is being developed with agents as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. I am mindful of time. We have almost taken up the full hour. I want to get to one last question because we've got a couple folks that are also listening to us on LinkedIn Live. So I'll ask the last question. I'm going to hand that one to you, Vandita, specifically, and then we will close out our time today. The question is, as a customer, my experience is that it is much harder to really get in touch with companies and brands. Trust is about accessibility. Agents mostly deliver basic information, and the engagement feels superficial. Can you give some examples of brands that have succeeded in this?
I mean, I think in general, I'll give a generic examples in terms of like customers that I think succeed in sort of, if I'm reading the question right, I wonder if they're also coming from like an outreach standpoint when they're trying to reach out to different companies and different brands. And I think there is a lot that, a business can do in terms of, it kind of ties into a little bit of like the call aspect that we talked about earlier, is that in certain regions, when you're trying to do, like, let's say outreach calls, and it's really hard to get in touch because your calls are getting ignored because you're not either showing up as a verified identity. I think there are aspects of that. But then also aspects where you can have more intentional, targeted outreach of getting in touch with companies and brands, and making sure that it's like rooted in understanding like what are your like goals, and like what the company or a particular brand is looking for. I think the engagement feeling superficial, we all remember like emails that were sent with just your first name and last name, and that is not checking the box on engagement, right? You want those outreach to feel personalized, and I think getting access to the insight about the customer, the company, the information of what they care about is is like the crux of making it more intentional so that it leads to more success.
That is great. Thank you so much. I know we didn't get to all the audience questions, but we really appreciate you submitting those, and we'll definitely take those into account for future sessions that we will run. Now, I thought this was a really engaging conversation, so I thank you, Vandita and Stefano, for joining us today. I took away a couple of key things. One, focus on AI that actually empowers true connection via conversations and growth. 2, prioritize trust through secure, verified, and seamless engagement. 3, we touched a lot on this one, build contextual, optimal channel journeys that carry over the context between every single touch point. And don't forget regional preferences while also maintaining global brand consistency and standards. We put out some research on predictions. You've got the link on the screen here if you'd like to read a little more about those. And if any of you that are listening are attending MWC Barcelona, I would love to meet you in person. I will be there, and so will many other Sinchers, so you can come and find us in Hall 5 at booth 5A15. With that, thank you all for attending, and thank you very much, Stefano and Vandita, for making the time to be with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.